All right. Hello, everybody. Today I am interviewing Kristin Wong, who has a couple of very cool sites. She has thewildwong.com, also kristinwong.com. Kristin spelled with a K, of course. Kristin is a very talented writer and video producer. She's written for sites like Lifehacker and Get Rich Slowly and NBC News and tons of other cool outlets. So I'm really excited to have her here today to talk about writing and freelancing and the creative process and time management because it seems like you're doing a lot of stuff. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So that's actually the first thing that I want to start with is the time management. It seems like you are working on a lot of different things. You're working on projects for clients, you're working on projects for yourself, and this is something that a lot of people, as they start to kind of freelance and work on their own projects, struggle with. How do you kind of at a high level manage your time?
I think at a high level, it's for me, it's about learning when to say no to things, which is really difficult for me as a freelance writer because I'm still trying to break out of that scarcity mindset of like, I'm not going to have enough money and now I'm a freelancer and maybe next month I won't have enough money. So I already have a scarcity mindset to begin with. And then as a freelancer, you're worried about those like feast or famine months. You're worried about the famine months. So when somebody offers me a gig, it's very hard for me to say no because I feel like I'm turning down money and I'm going to just make a huge mistake and be poor. and but I've had to learn to just say no because I your time is more valuable than money. So it's worth it to not be constantly stressed out because when you say yes to everything, I mean you stretch yourself thin also, and you're not producing as quality of content as you could be.
Got it. I love that. I think that's going to be really useful to a lot of people listening. So I imagine it goes something like this. Somebody sees your writing online, they find you, and they go, Kristin, you wrote for Lifehacker. We have this other site. Do you want to write content for us or produce a video, something like this? And you've started to say no to some of those opportunities. I don't want to let you off the hook so easily as you just say no. What's like the first step to saying no? And a follow-up to that is, what do you work on instead?
Um, I'm not sure what you mean. What's the first step to saying no?
So is it as easy as somebody says, Kristin, I want to give you money to do a project, and you say, no, sorry, I'm not available? Or have you found another way?
Well, it's just about organizing my time and then seeing what I don't have time for and who I have to say no to. So, like for me, I've learned that I can't really take on more than three clients at a time because if I do, I'm going to be really stressed. So then I make that my number. And again, it's really hard to, for me to say no to yeah, clients who find me and say, "Hey, we really want to write for you," especially because a lot of them are working on, cool things or they're trying to jumpstart something cool and I really want to be a part of it. Um, and sometimes I will say yes and just stress myself out for a while, to be honest, because it does sound like something cool and fun to work on. And then I just deal with being constantly busy. But that's not sustainable. So I put a cap on it, and I don't always follow that rule because, like I said, sometimes I do want to just work my butt off and work on something else, add something else to the pile. But for the most part, it's just learning to organize your time, and for a lot of it for me is not spending so much time planning things and just spending more time doing things because I will try to organize. I know I just said that organizing your time is important, but I also spend way too much time sometimes thinking about my schedule and where I'm going to move everything around, and I'm working on this book or this other project and when am I going to do that, and so I plot everything out because I'm a very organized person, but I also waste a lot of time trying to plan everything out, and sometimes I realize I made this spreadsheet about how I'm going to allocate my time and what tasks I'm going to do. And that took me an hour and I could have written a blog post in that time. So why didn't I just do that? You know what I mean? So a lot of times I think we think that we're busier than we actually are. And we have time for more things. We just have to learn to work on the things that actually matter. Does that make sense? Another thing that helps me, I mean, aside from just like the, big picture stuff, in learning to manage my time is working in a really focused way. And I don't know you're familiar with like the Pomodoro technique.
Totally.
Do you know? Yeah, so that helps me more than anything on those weeks that I'm just like, oh my God, I have 5 articles to write. How am I going to get this done? Well, I just got to dig in and do it. But usually what happens is I'll start working on article number 1 and I'm just thinking about article number 2, 3, 4, and 5 that I have to do. And it's just so overwhelming that I can't focus. So focus on one at a time. And I use the Pomodoro technique, which if anyone's not familiar with it, it's just you sort of allocate your time in 20-minute increments. So you have 20 minutes to work, you take a 5-minute break, then you have another 20 minutes to work, you take a 5-minute break. You do that a couple times, and then you take a longer break. So it just forces you to stay in the moment with your work and then to take a much needed break so you can reset your brain sort of to come back to the work with a fresh perspective. And that really helps too. I mean, that's more of like a time management hack, if you will, but the big picture stuff helps more than anything, just knowing how to organize your time, but not spending too much time organizing your time, and then learning when to say no to stuff and when to say yes to stuff.
I love it. So, big fan of the Pomodoro technique and really just time blocking in general. For me, it's a huge thing to like turn off Slack, turn off email, and just do the actual work. I don't suffer from the having to plan stuff. I tend to just like do and tinker along the way, which also takes time. But for other people like you who are planners, who feel the need to like create spreadsheets and like get very, very detailed about a plan before they execute, what's your advice to them? Is it they jump into Pomodoros? Do they just skip the planning? Do they do like a summary of planning so they can still satisfy that need? Because I'm trying to find the part where, well, that's not me, but to somebody else, that's their default mode.
So your question is if somebody, for those of us who are a little bit too organized and we plan a little bit too much, how do you find that sort of happy balance between making sure that you're prepared and not being like spending all your time preparing and then not actually doing anything?
Yeah, and I love that you're able to rephrase my questions into something that makes way more sense.
No, I'm just kind of trying to organize it in my own head, and now I've
Cool.
spent a lot of time organizing it without actually answering your question, ironically.
Perfect.
But no, I think innately you kind of know when you're ready, and I think at least I know for me when I'm just wasting time trying to plan something. I know I don't know that I have a trigger, but I just know when I'm doing it, and then I just stop doing it. I think if you're a writer, you just what I usually do is make an outline. So I will outline a few points, and then that's all. I just kind of set some boundaries for myself. And I think you can do this with anything. I mean, any other field or industry you're in. But with writing, I will set an outline, and then I'll give myself like 3 points in each section. And then no matter what, I just dig into it. If I have to do additional research as I go, fine. But that's the amount of planning that I do, and I allow myself to do. And then I just dig in and get it done. And if it's not perfect, I'll go back and edit it later. But Stephen King talks about this. A lot of writers talk about this. They call it like shitty first drafts. Like you just dig in and then you go back and edit later, but just get the words on the page. I think so. To answer your question, I think it's just about like setting time and boundaries. When I'm trying to plot out like what clients I'm going to work for this week and how I'm going to balance that with writing for my own blog or writing books, I say, okay, well, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to plan this, and after that, I'm just going to work. Because if something, what's the worst that can happen? Something doesn't get on the schedule. Somehow it's going to get on the schedule. But I'm not going to spend more than 15 or 30 minutes planning my week out, because at that point, I just feel like it's, for me, a waste of time. Now, everybody's numbers might vary, but I think just the key is setting guidelines and boundaries for yourself.
Is there a difference between how you approach client projects and your own projects?
How so?
Related to this planning. So, for example, I find if I'm working on stuff for clients, I'm much quicker to just like jump in and get it done because they're paying for a result. Versus my own thing, I'm like, I want this to be the best article ever written, and I'm going to take a lot more time to kind of let it flow.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see. I have kind of I have a problem with, and I've had a problem with this for years, like with my own projects, I'll put them off because I value them less because they're not attached to like an immediate monetary benefit. Like maybe I'll make money off of my blog. Maybe I'll make money, from this book that has yet to be published, but I am not going to see that paycheck on, the 15th. So I'm going to prioritize these other clients first. So it's been a struggle, like throughout my creative life, trying to prioritize my own things. And what I do now is um, I ask myself in the morning, like, what is the one thing that I can do today that's going to make me feel productive in my own career? And maybe it's writing an awesome article for a client, but it's usually something that's related to something that I'm working on, whether it's like a chapter of my book or an awesome blog post on my own site. And I will prioritize that and I'll get that done first. And that's the first thing that I work on in the morning. And I mean, sometimes I have to get up earlier to get that done. But when I get that done by like before noon, I feel like I can do anything else in the day. Like everything else is so much easier. I can write that article for that client, no problem. Instead of, see, I guess I do the opposite of what you're doing. Like if I'm writing something for myself and I'm super passionate and excited about it, or if I'm writing something for anybody, I'm super passionate and excited about it. I get through it really, really quickly. Whereas if I'm writing an article on like how to, how to open a 401k, I think that's a very important topic, but I'm not super excited about it. So I will take all day to write it, even though I know about it and, I have to do some research about it, but I just drag my feet. So I guess I have the opposite problem. And the way that I deal with it is just trying to prioritize that one thing, just one thing that is going to make me feel the most fulfilled that day.
Got it. It is hard to be excited about 401ks.
Yeah, I do my best to, that's kind of my job is to make that stuff exciting, but it's hard.
Cool. Now, I'm imagining somebody listening to this and they're like, listen to these two. They're talking about the struggles of managing your time when you have so many clients and more people want to work with you. So I want to change the frame a little bit and imagine it from theirs where they're like, I just discovered the internet and I know how to write a little bit. Where do clients even come from? So for me, I'd like to dig in your story of how I saw on your site that you were let off, let go or something from a job, and then from there you started to build up a freelancing business and a reputation, etc. Can you tell me a little bit about the beginning of that story, and then there'll be more questions as we go along?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of finding your first clients as a freelancer. For me, it was being open about my goal and what I was trying to do. I wanted to be a freelance writer, even when I was, back in Texas before I moved to LA. But I was afraid to tell people that that's what I wanted to do because I was afraid that if I failed, I would look like I would look silly. Like anybody else who says, I'm going to be a freelance writer, and then they don't do it, and then they go back to their regular 9 to 5. And I didn't want to be that person. But the thing is, you have to put yourself out there. Otherwise, I mean, how else are you going to get clients? And I told everybody I knew. I told my friends. I remember I told my friend John at the time, like, this is what I'm going to do. And then my friends told their friends, like, oh, Krista wants to be a freelance writer. Some of them probably made fun of me, didn't think I could do it. But the point is, the word got out that that's what I wanted to do. And my friend John, when I told him, he was like, oh, well, you know what? I am working for this company, and they're trying to build their website, and we're looking for a freelance writer. So I got that gig, and it wouldn't have happened if I didn't open up about it and tell my friend. Another friend of mine was a freelance writer, and I was super embarrassed to tell him because it was like he was successful, but he was also my greatest. Like those are the kind of people you should tell, are people who are already doing what you want to do, so you can get advice from them. So I had to kind of get over my pride and be open. And I said, I want to do what you do. How do you do it? And he introduced me to another client. I mean, these clients didn't pay great, but they got me some experience and they got my foot in the door. And so part of it, yeah, was just admitting to myself that this is what I want to do and not being afraid of what anyone thinks about it and just embracing it fully. I don't think some people might not have a problem with that. Like they'll just tell everybody what they want to do. But I'm one of those people who, is I don't like telling people what I'm doing until after it's done, but you really have to ask for help. And that's something that I've learned over, like, that's such an important lesson that I've learned over the past 5 years, I would say, is like, there's so much power in just asking for help and not being afraid that you're going to look stupid. Like, I'm so afraid that I'm going to look stupid all the time, and that it always works against me, you know? You just have to, even, you have to take down your pride and just tap your network and ask for help.
Totally. So you decide you want to be a writer, you start telling people about it, and opportunities come, right? They just kind of do. They materialize out of
Yeah.
those conversations. But like you said, a lot of those early clients that people often get, they're like smaller projects. They don't pay as well. Sometimes they're very difficult to work with. Eventually, you need to graduate to working with kind of bigger clients, more regular clients, better paying clients, all the things that actually make working as a freelancer sustainable. So, how did you go from working with those kind of one off small projects to the work that you're doing now?
I think it's not different. Like, I leveraged those clients one by one to get to the point that I'm at now. I mean, the answer is really the same. Like, you tap your network, you ask for help. And I mean, yeah, you do all of the traditional advice that you'll read about what freelancers should do, join Elance, reach out, pitch clients directly. I've definitely done that. It's worked sometimes, but for the most part, it's just leveraging the experience that I already have and then networking with people I already know. When I started, my first big client was MSN. And I reached out to a friend of mine who was an editor there. She actually used to be my boss. And she knew that I wanted to be a freelance writer because I emailed her and I said, look, I really want to be a freelance writer. And I've heard that guest posting is the way to do that. And do you guys ever have any opportunities to guest post at MSN? And she, I mean, there's only so much she can do. So I didn't hear from her for a while. She's like, oh, if we ever do, I'll let you know. I didn't hear from her for a few months. And then after a few months, she said, do you, no, we don't guest post, but do you just want to like write for us? And we'll pay you this much. Is it okay? And it was like more money than I ever thought a writer could be paid. So I was like, I guess it's okay. And I took the job, of course. And then people will listen to that advice and say, okay, well, so what is my solution to have a friend who works for, a major online news site? And that's really not, I think the lesson is you have to be resourceful. Like, if you want to make any kind of career that, is self motivated, like you're a freelancer, you're self-employed, or you're starting your own business, whatever it is, like you have to be resourceful and leverage. Like, I also wouldn't have gotten the job at MSN if I hadn't worked for these other places, because like I said, I worked with the friend that I asked because she knew that, and she wanted to see writing samples. So she, without that experience, I wouldn't have gotten the job. And without being honest and open with her about my goals, I wouldn't have gotten the job. And without just networking, I wouldn't have gotten the job. So you have to utilize every resource you have, whether it's your network, your friends, your experience, whatever.
When did you start doing video production?
When I worked for MSN, a friend of mine, but my editor there at the time, they wanted to do a video series. So she asked me like, hey, I think you would be really good for this. So would you want to, be a part of this video series? So I said, yeah, sure. And I did it. And that's how that started.
Okay, cool. Now for me, writing comes very naturally, right? You write throughout school as a student, you write for projects professionally, etc., and eventually you can just kind of do it and people will pay you money for it. I feel like video production is a different skill set. So this opportunity came up with MSN. You said yes because you like to say yes to stuff. How do you go from saying yes to a project like that to learning the skills to do it at a high enough level that they can publish it?
I just learned it on my own. You download the program and you figure it out. You Google stuff and you watch videos and you figure it out. There's so many ways to learn things nowadays. Like, it's so easy to take a course or just watch a YouTube video and teach yourself these things. So I said yes, and then I kind of had to learn, and I had to learn, how to assemble a crew and find a good camera person and all that good stuff. And It is harder, I think, for video production is harder um, it, to sort of find clients. And I will say, I got lucky with MSN. Like my editor just thought, like, hey, you have a fun personality, and maybe you'd be good for this video series. And so I kind of just got lucky with that. And I think you can't discount the role of luck in these things, but you also have to like be resourceful and leverage, whatever you can to make it happen. And a lot of the other video clients I got after that had nothing to do with MSN. I think I started doing work for Fidelity, and I pitched them, and I only pitched them because I got laid off of MSN, and I thought like, well, why don't I just try to do my own thing and do like this money series? But I need, to find somebody who will help me sponsor it or something. And I was in the personal finance realm, like I was writing for Get Rich Slowly and these other places, and Fidelity was one of the people that would, they'd kind of pitch me their stories, and I kept in contact with them. They were very nice. So I said, well, why don't I pitch them, pitch them this video idea I have for a series? And they went for it. So again, it's just about like, the lesson isn't, oh, well, know somebody who's a PR person for a major investment firm. It's the lesson is like, well, who do you already know that you can help, that can help you achieve your goals, right?
Totally. But for the record, knowing some of those people does help.
Yes, of course.
Totally. All right. So I'm curious because you've written for very different audiences. When you write on a personal blog, it kind of starts out as like people that know you and maybe their friends, and then some other people find you. But it's very different from publishing something on Lifehacker where there's a built-in audience of hundreds of thousands of people that could see any given post on any given day. Actually, much more than that over the course of weeks or months, etc. So, what have you learned from publishing for some of these very high traffic sites?
You mean as opposed to just like, publishing on my own blog or something like that?
Yeah,
Um, well, obviously it's a lot, you can grow a lot quicker. And it was kind of strange because I started, I asked MSN if I could guest post for them because I wanted to build an online presence and build my online portfolio. But I wanted to build an online portfolio because I wanted to write for sites like MSN. So I don't know, it was kind of an ironic, weird thing that happened. And it's something that I've kind of been trying to balance ever since then is like, how do I how do I make a name for myself outside of these places, but then I'm also trying to write for these places. So, what am I really doing? Uh, for me, it's like, whether it's Lifehacker or Get Rich Slowly or wherever I'm writing for, I mean, I just try to use what I learned there and, the audience that likes my stuff there to promote, you know, not my site, but promote who I am as a writer, So like if I'm telling a story at Get Rich Slowly, it's, I want those people to kind of follow my story. If they like it, like I want them to follow my story and who I am. But I mean, I think you can tell, I know that like I've gotten to write for Lifehacker, I've gotten to write for these bigger name sites, but I think like as long as you're telling a valuable story, you're going to get attention for it in some way. One popular post, I rarely do I get an email from like somebody that I, used to work with or I went to school with and like, oh, hey, I saw your post here. I didn't know you wrote for them. Every now and then I will. But one time that I got a post from somebody that like saw my article was something that I had just written on my own personal blog before I started writing for any of these places. And it was something I wrote about feminism, and they saw it somewhere. Somebody picked it up. And, so it's totally doable to get your story out there, even if you're not writing for like Lifehacker or something like that.
totally. I found one difference for me of writing for a larger site versus my own is people don't comment on mine because there's no comment box at the end. So I don't necessarily know who's reading and who's kind of into it. But then I'll go out into public, go out into the real world, and I'll see a friend that I haven't seen for a while. And they'll go, "Oh, your post about this was really interesting because blah blah blah." And I'll go, "Oh, people are reading it. That's cool."
Yeah.
Got it. Uh, I want to ask a couple of questions about the editorial process at some of these larger sites. If anything is proprietary, you can just tell me, sorry, no, we can't share all of Lifehacker secrets or MSN secrets or whatever.
Yeah.
But how does it work? Like, where does the idea from the article come from? How does it turn into a draft? How does the draft eventually go to being published?
Um, well, usually I come up. I mean, in every instance, I'm usually coming up with the ideas, which is awesome because I've written for places that wasn't always the case. Sometimes I still write for places that they want to come up with the ideas and tell me what to write about, and that's fine too because they usually come up with the editors usually know what they're doing. They come up with great ideas, but I like the fact that I get to sort of pitch my own stuff, and then if I'm really bored with my job and what I'm doing, I have no one to blame but myself because I'm pitching the ideas. So I'll pitch an idea, and then I write it. They'll edit it, and we post it. I mean, it's a pretty simple process. It's the same process that probably you use for your own blog or something like that.
How rigorous are they with editing?
Um, I I they're not that like I don't want to. I have a lot of experience writing and working with editors, so I usually don't have a ton of edits, and I always every time like I have questioned something that an editor, I've learned to like rely on their expertise is what I'm trying to say. Because anytime I've questioned like an editor that's like, oh, this isn't going to work, or you're wording this differently, or you need to change sometimes they'll just say like, oh, you need to totally change the outline of this post, like just change the angle. I always question it because I'm like, no, I'm sure I know what I'm doing. And, I don't always know what I'm doing. So like editors are experts, and I've gotten the chance to work with some really smart editors who I think have made my writing better. I think that's the reason why nowadays my writing doesn't really require a lot of edits, is because I've learned to trust editors and think like an editor. I would never want their job because it just seems so overwhelming. But I try to learn to think like an editor.
Got it. So one experience I've had working with editors on larger sites is sometimes they have different priorities, which is they're not your goal might be, I'm going to write the best piece of content I have because that's what I want this audience to be exposed to. I want them to be able to learn from the knowledge that I have. For the editor, it might be, yes, we want to produce great content. We also want to do this SEO thing so that it performs
Oh,
well,
okay.
and so that like we want to link to this other page in our site. Do you ever feel like a little bit violated when they start doing the SEO stuff to your article?
Um, we don't really do that a lot at the sites that I write for. To be honest, I'm very lucky in that they give me free reign to do that. But I have written for sites in the past where, yes, it was super frustrating when it's like, oh, well, write about this topic that you're not at all interested in, and neither are our readers, but random people are going to be searching for it, and we want to rank high in Google. When it's like it just feels so unfulfilling, and yeah, it's really frustrating because it changes. Like if they're wanting to change something that you're writing about and make sure that you plug in like a keyword phrase, it's really frustrating to have your words sort of butchered and made to sound completely unnatural to make room for Google keywords.
Totally. I love that little shudder at the keywords. It's yeah, my experience too. Definitely right for people, not for robots. Um,
Yeah.
all right, so
Well,
you go ahead.
well, I don't want to get, too into it, but I mean, I think that's a big problem with a lot of writing in general, or I mean, just creativity in general these days. Like what you said, write for people, not for robots. And I think a lot of us sort of work for robots and not for people. Like we look at our Google Analytics and our metrics, and we become so obsessed with like our online presence and what we need to do to like what social media strategies we need to do to build our online presence that we forget like why we're doing it in the first place. Which I think for most creative people, it's to produce cool content, to produce quality content, whether it's useful or it's just creative or whatever. I don't know. I'm kind of cynical about it because I'll read these articles or listen to these podcasts like, oh, spend 25% of your time creating something and then spend 75% of your time marketing it. It's like, okay, that sounds great to get views and stuff, but what about me feeling fulfilled in my career? Like, I don't want to spend 75% of the time branding myself. I want to create things. So I kind of got off course with your comment about like writing for people and not for robots reminded me of that. And I think that's something that a lot of like creative, like we struggle with that, right?
Oh, it's cool. I love it. I love to see the passion come out. You have two personal sites, at least two personal sites. So the two that I mentioned at the beginning of the interview. Can you tell me about that decision? Why have KristinWong.com as well as the Wild Wong?
Because I have two different audiences that I want to serve. I wanted to have a blog, but I wanted people to go to, like, potential clients to go to KristinWong.com and be able to just see, not my latest thoughts on whatever. I wanted the freedom to be able to blog about whatever I want to blog about or reach whatever target audience I want to reach without alienating or, drawing in, without alienating, clients or whatever. Not that my content at my blog alienates them, so maybe that's the wrong word, but I just wanted to keep those separate because I wanted to start a blog that, like, is about travel and is about finding yourself as a freelancer and is about figuring out how to take control of your money and all the things that I'm, trying to deal with personally in my own life. And I didn't want that necessarily to be a part of, like, my freelance writer, freelance content creator brand. So I want, like, a potential client to go to KristinWong.com and say, okay, what does she do and what can I hire her for? And then I want somebody who's like, I really want to get my finances in order. I wanted a site for them too, where I could appeal to them too. And I think that those are two very different groups. So I could put a blog on KristinWong.com, which the Wild Wong and Kristin Wong are still linked. So, I mean, you can still go to my, KristinWong.com and hit blog and you'll be taken to my blog. But I really wanted to make those two separate things because I think they are two separate things, like my personal ramblings and other freelancers and my professional side of, like, representing clients.
Totally. Did you build your own site?
Yes. Yeah. And I say that with hesitance because, I say that hesitantly because I should have hired a professional to do it. And and I actually have now, but it's taken me a long time to learn when to ask for help with things. And web design is definitely something I should be asking for help with.
Got it. Cool. All right. So I'm curious about the headlines on the 2 pages. So one was creating content to spark empowerment. What does that mean?
So, I think you said you found me from Get Rich Slowly, right? And I write about money a lot. And like you said, 401ks are really boring. So a lot of times I grapple with that. I'm like, why do I write about 401ks and stuff? And I mean, I pitch these ideas. And why do I write about this stuff when even I sometimes find it really boring? And the reason that I do is because I really genuinely like empowering people. And I love when I get emails from people who are like, oh, I read your blog post from, even if it's from a couple of years ago, I read your blog post at Get Rich Slowly and it really helped me get my finances in order. Like, that feels very fulfilling to me. And I think, the clients that I attract have the same sort of goal. Like, they want to help people get their finances in order, or they want to help people figure out how to build wealth or whatever it is, live life on their own, by their own rules, on their own terms. And that's what attracts me about those subjects. So that's kind of my professional motto, I guess.
Cool. Very, very cool. How have your goals changed? So when you started out, it was, I want to be a freelance writer, and now you are a freelance writer. So what's the next step for you, or what do you see in the next couple of years?
I mean, one of my bucket list goals is to write a book and be an author. And I'd really like to do that. And I'd really like to get back to, I love writing content that, helps people and empowers people. But I really want to get back to writing a lot of content that's, like, fiction based and creative. And I haven't been doing that in a while. And I really want to get back to writing fiction. And I do that. I think that, like, I'm starting to feel like there are two different kinds of writers, like you or two different reasons you write. You write to communicate an idea, which is, I love doing that. And you write to, create something, to create a story or whatever. And I love doing that too. So I feel like I've been spending a lot of time writing to communicate. And now I kind of want to write to create something.
Got it. Cool. Is that part of building your own platform? So right now you write for your various blogs and you write online in a number of places. people come to your site, they sign up for emails, etc. Is the idea that you're building an audience that eventually will write what you create and what you want to create? Read, not write.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. That's definitely a part of it. That I want to try to build a following of people who enjoy my writing and are willing and want to read other stuff I write. Definitely.
Cool, very cool. You have somewhere on your site a media mention that I thought was cool. It looks like you were on Fox News.
Yeah,
Can you tell
yeah.
me a little bit
Years.
about what happened there and specifically how you prepared for it?
Well, I prepared for it by researching as many stats as I could on like student loans and student debt and all this stuff. This was a few years back, so it's like stuff that I know now because I've been writing about it so long. But back then I was very new to writing about personal finance. And then they like asked me zero questions about that. And they asked me about kind of my own story getting out of student loan debt. But they found my story on Get Rich Slowly. And they found it and I guess they thought it was a good story about somebody who paid off debt in a short amount of time, and so they wanted to interview me about that, and they did.
Cool. Who are some writers that you look up to?
Do you mean like kind of free, like communication writers or creator writer? Like,
All right. Okay, I'm going to try to ask like much clearer questions. I'm getting the
no.
pattern. So I'm thinking like people that either when you first started, maybe you were emulating their style, or maybe something about their writing just like really resonated with you. People who kind of represent the writer that you feel you are or want to be, something like this.
Well, from a blogging perspective, I would say Ramit Sethi, who you've interviewed him. I love his writing style. It's really nothing like mine, but I just really admire it because I think he's mastered the art of conversational writing, especially like blogging. Like he's really, really good at it. Like I feel like I can hear his voice when I read his writing. So like as far as blogging goes, I mean, I always read his stuff and I love the way he writes. Other than that, I mean, if we're talking just writers in general, like I love like David Simon's stuff. I love Alice Munro. I don't know. I have a lot of favorite writers. I don't know that there's anybody that I necessarily try to emulate. Maybe I should, but there are a lot of writers that I really respect and enjoy their stuff.
Cool. So you mentioned Ramit's writing style and how he's mastered the conversational tone. I totally agree. I also think he's pretty funny, which helps.
Yeah.
Is there a specific example of something that he's written that really stands out in your mind as being that, or is that too specific of a question for a call like this?
Um, well, in his book I Will Teach You to Be Rich, he talks about 401ks. Speaking of making 401ks exciting, and he says something in there where he's like 401ks are like, I don't remember what name he says, but he's like they're like that girl, a girl named Gretchen. Like you don't think she's hot, but she's actually, once you meet her, she has a really great personality or something like that. And I just thought it was like the most offensive thing that I've read, but it was also like the most in a good way, I guess. Like I was like, what? I read it and it evoked emotion in me, and then I thought like, wow, I've never had this much of a feeling toward a 401k, and then I realized like, wow, he's a really good writer to be able to take. First of all, I know exactly what he means, and I was silly to get like, it's kind of silly to get offended. I know what he's trying to say, but just to be able to like make something like 401k so relatable and also so funny and slightly offensive in a comedic way, like that's pretty brilliant.
Totally. I think there's another line in this book that's something like, "This is so boring, just like throw a jar of fire ants on me and watch as I scratch myself to death." I don't know. His line is better. His is more polished. His is the New York Times best-selling writing. My version of it is poor, but yeah, just
That sounds
like
familiar. Yeah, I like that.
funny, self-deprecating sometimes. He's definitely good. Cool. On the topic of kind of quality writing and good examples, do you have like a piece or two that you've written that you're exceptionally proud of that stand out as like ones that you really like?
Um, I I actually keep a list of stuff that I really like because I write a lot of content that I forget what I've written. But I think like the pieces that stand out the most are the ones that I get emails from other people saying like, "Hey, I read this and I really related to it." And usually it's something like one of them is like I wrote an article for Lifehacker on how I got over my fear of being shy and learned to speak up for myself and say yes to scary things like this interview. Like not that you're scary, but like doing
Terrified.
interviews. You're just so scary, Michael. No, but so I wrote that post, and it was something that I just didn't really think anybody could relate to. I was like, I'm a weirdo, but I really just want to write this because I need to get it out of my head and get my thoughts on paper. And it was like more of an essay than anything. But I wrote it, and I mean, that was a couple of years ago, and I still get emails from total strangers who say, like, oh, I read this, and they'll tell me their story about how they were at work and they were bullied and their coworkers took advantage of them and manipulated them. They finally like stood up for themselves and they feel so much more powerful now. And it's makes me feel good that like, wow, okay, so my crazy thoughts helped somebody, like they were relatable to somebody. So yeah, any post like that, it's never a post that I'm like, it's the posts that I'm most proud of, and the posts that usually other people are most receptive to are posts that I didn't really think about too much. Like, oh, what kind of viral post can I write? It's always a post that's like just from the heart, you know?
Totally. And personally meaningful to you, and that resonates with other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. So I found that most, like even random people that reach out to you from online, most of them are pretty nice, right? Especially when they're talking about how good your writing is, then they're very nice. But
Mm-hmm.
occasionally they're not. Occasionally they're like miserable people that say really mean things and on and on and on, which you do unfortunately see as part of the community on some of these larger sites that you write on, people that just want to like pick everybody apart. How do you handle the haters?
Not very well. I mean,
Uh-oh.
I've gotten better. For me, like what I've tried to learn to do is not just completely write off everything they say, no matter how offensive it is. Like, I mean, I've been called names, I mean, racial slurs, it's run the gamut. But sometimes they say stuff that's like, well, what's their point here? And how can I apply that to make myself better? Um, I think, I'm trying to think of a recent example. Somebody emailed me one time, and this was at my own personal blog, which was made it even like more, it hurt my feelings even more because it wasn't just like some random, millionth reader at Lifehacker or something. It was like somebody who found me, read my blog, and then wanted to tell me how much I suck. And so they basically said like, oh, you're a fraud because you're talking about saving money and stuff, and you say you grew up poor, but you're Asian, and Asian people never grow up poor, something crazy like that. And so what he was saying was obviously insane and racist and stupid. But I thought like, well, why does he think that? Why does he think I'm a fraud? And is that crossing other people's minds in some way? And then it made me think like, well, maybe I've become kind of tone deaf over the years to like to what it's like to really be poor and to grow up poor. And maybe I shouldn't be saying that. And or maybe if I am saying that, like I should quantify my experience to people so people who are actually like really struggling to make ends meet and living hand to mouth aren't like, let me take this personal finance advice from this person who really, doesn't necessarily have the same experience I do, so the advice might not apply as much. Um, so I don't know, it just made me, and not that any of those things are true or what I, or, but I took what he said and thought about like, well, why is he saying it? What's the purpose of it? And how can I use what he's saying to improve my site or improve myself or my writing?
Got it. I love it, and I love that specific example. One thread that I've noticed throughout the interview is that you seem to have a very high level of self-awareness, and it sounds like that helped with dealing with somebody like this. Because frankly, I think you might be giving them too much credit. It's like, yeah, you found a way to make it productive, but it's kind of a racist jerk, and
Right. Yeah.
unfortunately, some of these people are just online. But no, that's cool that you found a productive way to handle it. Um, I think I'm going to go off on a tangent for a second. I think that takes a little bit of experience with it because when you get that
For
first
sure.
email or the first comment online, it kind of eats at you, right? You go back and read it, and you let yourself lose sleep over it. But over time, it's just It's just another thing that happens in the day.
Yeah, and I think like going back, like this guy is a racist jerk, so it's in a way that you sometimes you want to think like, well, what is he saying? And maybe I'm doing something right if I'm pissing somebody like that off, you know? So in a way, like you can take that criticism and think like, you know, consider the source that it's coming from and then adjust yourself accordingly. But I think, like you said, like there are a few phases that you go through. Like once you start getting hateful comments, they really hurt your feelings. You think about them constantly, and you tell your friends and family, like, I got this horrible comment, and they say you're crazy. Why are you worried about internet trolls? And then you get to a point where you just laugh them off and you think they're silly, and then you get to a point also where you kind of um, yeah, try to find something. Okay, well, what are they trying to say here? I'm just looking at this objectively. You know, forget all the other stupid stuff. And you know, a lot of those, like this guy was a troll, obviously, but there are a lot of commenters who are like borderline rude, but they still have something good to say, but they're just saying it in a really not nice way, and so they're not necessarily a troll. They're just like a contrarian, like jerk. Um, and so those kind of irk me more than anything because they're smart and they get it, but they just don't agree with me. And those can be like the hardest. Like the trolls are actually like the easiest to deal with because it's like, oh, obviously you're crazy, so I don't even need to give you the time of day. But like it's the smart people who have something substantial to say who can really eat at you.
All right, watch out for the smart folk. All right, I've got two more questions before we wrap up. I'm going to tell you the second one first so that you can kind of start letting it churn, which is just advice for somebody listening who wants to, get started with freelance and that wants to get started with writing online. What's like the action step that they can take today/tomorrow, because it's already a little bit late today. The first question then, more of a softball, which is travel. You said that you like to write about travel. Tell me about some of your experiences. Where did you go? Where do you like to go? Where do you hope to go?
My favorite travel experience is, and I really want to go back, is a few years ago, I went to this little town in Colombia called Leticia, and it's in the Amazon rainforest, and it was just crazy. Like when I was a kid, I would look at pictures of the Amazon rainforest, like in my textbooks, and think that's just not a place you go. And so a friend of mine is from Bogota, and he was going back to visit family, so I asked if I could go, and I asked, hey, let's go to the Amazon. He's like, no, you don't go there. Just like I thought as a kid. And I was like, no, but you can, there are flights. So he's like, yeah, but we probably shouldn't be going there. But we did, and it was fine. Everything was great, and it was an awesome experience, and it was just crazy to fly into the Amazon rainforest, and you see nothing but trees, like as far as you can see, and it's just a really surreal experience. I would love to do that again.
Cool. Very, very cool. Now, when you travel, are you able to continue working and both on your own projects and client projects when you do, or do you take the time off?
Both. So I will, I try to take some time off to just travel and reset myself at least once a year. I didn't really get a chance to do that this year, but once a year I try to do that. And I also try to take advantage of the fact that I get to work from anywhere, and I try to take advantage of that and travel whenever I can and get stuff done. It's hard to manage. I actually have a blog post that I've just written about that recently. It's just how to balance both of those things. Because a lot of times what I'll do is just try to, I either make one of two mistakes where I try to front load everything before I leave so I can enjoy as much travel as possible. Or I will just do it when I get there and then end up spending not a lot of time traveling and just working from coffee shops instead of like actually seeing the city that I'm visiting.
Right. Is LA a good place to be based for a freelancer?
Um,
I'm
I
thinking
mean,
about like accessibility for the airport, getting places, cost of living,
yeah.
community.
Well, cost of living, no. I mean, if I could, I love LA now. Like we were talking about, like everybody kind of has a love-hate relationship with LA, and I have that too. But I do love it for the most part. And I don't think that there's necessarily anywhere else that I would personally want to live. But I don't know. Sometimes I visited Cleveland recently, and I actually thought, like, well, maybe I thought about moving there because I was like, hey, the cost of living is low nowadays. Everywhere you go is cool because our society is becoming so globalized that you don't just have to go to New York or LA to go to a cool restaurant. You can go to Cleveland and go to a cool restaurant. You can go to like Minneapolis or wherever and go to a cool restaurant. Like everywhere, every city is cool. So I think LA, yeah, it's a fine place to be based. Like there's a lot of culture here, but there's a lot of culture in a lot of different places. And I think if you're the type of freelancer who wants to travel a lot and you want to like be this digital nomad type, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know that I'd necessarily pick LA because I think it's expensive for the most part. So if you're not going to be there anyway, why have an expensive apartment there? I actually have a friend who is a digital nomad and she travels everywhere like for 3 months at a time. And she came back to LA recently and she really didn't like it because she was just stuck in traffic all the time. And she felt trapped because she's so used to like bouncing around different places. And here she was like, I'm always in a car. So to be honest, I don't know that it's a very, very cool city. But it's a very, very cool city to spend time in. If you're bouncing around different places, I'd say like move somewhere cheaper and save your money for travel.
Got it. Cool. Although I am going to add a little footnote at the end there, which is you're from Texas. Cleveland is much further north. Cold winters, very, very cold winters up here.
Yeah.
So if you are listening, you're thinking about relocating, weather is a factor as well. All right, so we're coming up to the very last question, which is a piece of advice, a first step for somebody that wants to do what you have, build an online presence, freelancing, etc.
I would say the one actionable step, look at your network and see where you can tap to reach out to somebody to help you. Or if it's not your network, LinkedIn or something, and just reach out to one person and tell them, hey, this is my goal. This is what I want to do. And can I, get some insight from you? How did you do it? I want to do what you do. How did you make it happen? And just do that. I mean, it's easy to send an email, and I've the handful of times that I've done that, I've never regretted it. I mean, it doesn't always work out. Recently, I actually like my goal for this year is like I want to write for a magazine, so I interviewed somebody that I write for them digitally, and I said, hey, can I write for your magazine? This is just my goal. And it didn't work out because the magazine actually recently folded. But she was like, but if it didn't, like I would be more than happy to hook you up with that. So I should have asked for her sooner, right? I should have tapped the network sooner. So I would just say, don't be afraid to ask and connect with somebody.
Got it. And to get very clear on that, it sounds like when you're asking, even though there may be this background idea that this person could help introduce you to a publisher or the magazine, whatever it happens to be, you really do just have the pure intention of learning from them, right? To connect with them, to ask them a few questions. Got
it. You don't want to, email somebody and say, hey, what can you do for me? But it's about creating a deeper connection and learning from them, like you said, and trying to find, how they did it and being inspired by them, not just saying like, hey, get me a job.
Cool. I love it. I think that's a great way to cap it off. So thank you for chatting with me.
No, thank you.